seconds. All right, everyone, I'm going to get my video turned on and Ken will be with us too. And we will get started.
No.
All right, we're here. All right, thanks for everybody that joined us this webinar. Ken and I are going to be talking about AI and automation and where compliance falls in this. And mostly everybody joining us is an MSP or in some way related to the IT world. We're so excited to be talking about this. Ken and I do conferences all over where we speak. We've spoken at Exchange, Women of the Channel, Next Gen, CMMC, MSP Initiative. So him and I are very passionate about talking about these topics. And so a little bit about us. I have been doing AI and automation before this was even a thing. I started this company after selling my tech company in 2018, and it's just one of the things that brings me so much joy. I'm the founder of Workday Ninja, and Ken and I are both 10KSB alumni for those of you that are also alumni that have joined us.
And I'm Ken Fanger. I'm president of On Technology Partners and also a 10KSB alumni. And want to give a shout out to anyone that would be thinking about it. It is a wonderful program. I also am presenting around the country on humanizing security. AI is not enough. I talk about how we are using AI, how we're misusing AI. I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to be presenting in November in Washington, D.C. on AI, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So when we talk about this, and I do want to take a quick second here, AI is automation, but automation is not AI. And Alane will go into that in a lot more depth. But it's important to remember that as we go through this, because I think everybody hears the word AI and they're like, oh, that is everything. The world will be solved. So we'll talk about all that here in a little bit. We'll make sure that we cover that, help you understand how it works. I'll let Alane go ahead and explain what's coming next.
Yeah, so thanks, Ken, for making that association or that disassociation between the two. But we're going to talk about using AI from a security standpoint, using AI with and with, or using automation with and without AI, because it can be done without AI. And then Ken is going to wrap us up with compliance and talking about what's voluntary, what's required, and the fun CMMC new requirements.
Okay, hope everybody loves this picture. This is an AI generated picture, and it is what I call the Spockinator. We talk about AI, we're out there, everybody hears about AI, ChatGPT. The truth is, machine learning and artificial intelligence has been around for a long time. It is getting better as it goes, but we now have this fear-awe factor. The reason I call this Spockinator is because we have two perceptions of AI. We have the perfect logic situation where it's like Spock, it doesn't make any mistakes, it uses logic to answer every problem. Or the other side of it is the Terminator. It's going to take all our jobs, it's going to destroy the universe, and it's going to leave us bleeding on the ground. So let's take that and let's talk about what is the good, the bad, and the ugly.
And I'm going to take a quick second. If y'all have questions, we forgot to mention this at the beginning. If you have questions, please put it into the Q&A box, and we're going to try to work those in while we're going through things. Sorry, we forgot to mention that when we were getting started, but use that Q&A box and ask any questions.
Thank you. So please make sure you ask questions. When you're here, we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. What is AI? I just was at PAX 8, phenomenal conference, phenomenal people, but there was a lot of AI conversations. And one of the things they put up, which amazed me and kind of terrified everyone, was they put up artificial super intelligence. And they have this thing where they are putting out there, it's going to replace every job. We don't need lawyers. We don't need, well, pretty much according to what you read, almost anything. I saw an expectation that by 2028, we will no longer have teachers. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty sure I don't want a computer teaching my children. But I am very much, and this is where it becomes important to realize what it's really good at. It is very good at helping us get a starting journey. It is very good at taking care of a lot of that nuanced work that's very repetitive and iterative. And when we talk about automation, that's the point of automation. Don't do something that a computer can do quicker. Let it do it so that you can do what you do better. But computers can only do what is predictive. And I have another slide that I'll show that I'll go into this. So computers use what is predictive as opposed to adaptive. Humans are adaptive. If I put a human being in a box with no information, they can still make a decision, but a computer cannot. It is literally a series of algorithms that you have to feed it data. And we've become very convinced that it can do everything. It's going to be super intelligent. The real truth is it's just predictive. It is taking what it took from the past and estimating what it's going to be in the future. But humans do something different. They can look at an environment that they have never experienced before, and they can adapt to it. It's emotional intelligence. I remember when I was young, everybody was like, ooh, intelligent quota, IQ, everything is on IQ. We are all going to decide how smart somebody's going to be, therefore how successful they will be. And the truth is, they found just because you have a high IQ, just because you can retain information, did not mean that you were going to be successful. And we all have that one friend who is a super genius and yet is sitting eating hamburgers at home because he can't actually do anything. You need to have emotional intelligence, and computers don't have any emotional intelligence. And that brings us to the conversation of what does it mean to have humans in and on the process? So when you have AI, and I love this, we cannot replace the human beings, but we can augment them. And I want you to think about AI more like a hammer than a replacement. I could push a nail in with my finger, not very well, but I can do it. But if you give me a hammer, all of a sudden, my human ability is expanded exponentially. AI is expanding the human ability exponentially. It is letting me, who has very little artistic skills, you ever saw me draw, I'd be a stick person with bad smile on it, but I could make that picture that you saw by describing what I wanted it to be. But I still needed to have that want in me, and that's where AI is different than a lot of the other journeys. I can use, and large language models lets me use English or our language to put what I want, but it's still taking it and putting it into a predictive engine. Meaning if you know what that engine does and is, you can manipulate it. And when we talk about compliance, that's going to be a big part of the journey when you talk about AI. And remember, automation is not AI. AI is automation. So there are many other parts to automation when you're looking at it. We use a lot of automation, and we'll talk, I use like ConnectWise, there's Kaseya. There's a lot of ways to make your team more productive that is not innately AI. And I'll tell you, Copilot, and Copilot's amazing, but when we're doing PAX 8, it was amazing how much they were saying, tell us what you want to do with it, and trying to get the audience to share what you can do with it, because that human element determines its future. But I want to talk about the statistics right now. 69% of IT professionals think that AI is going to be necessary. And why that is because the number of attacks every year increases by a factor of 2 or 3, which means instead of 1,000 attacks, we're 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 attacks. And going through all of that information is not possible with a human being. But you can process all of that through an artificial intelligence that looks for patterns and then provides that information much more condensed for a human to make that final decision. And I'll give you a more down-to-earth home realization of where this is being used. All of us know about getting an X-ray. Used to be a doctor had to review the X-ray and see what was going on. Now the medical profession will run that X-ray through an AI get an initial diagnosis, and then the doctor will confirm it. And that lets them get through hundreds of x-rays that used to take time for only 4 or 5. So now we can allow thousands of analysis to be done, but only the top 10 or 50 need to have that human interaction. But that 10 or 50 need a human being. We need the person on the AI. We need it to give out information, but not take it just at its own value. And there's a lot of people that I've seen, they'll go out, they'll run blog post, and they'll put it without ever even reading it themselves. And then all of a sudden it'll have what's called hallucinations, which is really just AI lying to us. But AI doesn't lie because it doesn't have any emotions. When you lie, you're emotionally trying to trick somebody. AI doesn't want to trick you. It doesn't care. And I was out a university presentation talking about AI, and the person presenting it went and did an AI search on himself, and it said he was dead. Now, he either is the most amazing ghost I ever met, or it wasn't giving the right information. But it had his right birthday, it had his right information, where he lived, but it said he deceased in 2024 or 2023. So mistakes do happen. AI is not perfect, it gets better, but it'll never have emotions because we don't understand how we get emotions. So we need to make sure that, one, we understand the algorithm that we're using, two, what the outcome we expect, and three, how do we use the information? We've all heard, I hope, or maybe we haven't. Let me take a minute and tell you this one. United Airlines did a chat bot, and people figured out how to get the chat bot to give them free flights. If you understand the algorithm, you can use it to trick the AI. And then you can get outcomes that were not anticipated. Humans are amazingly good at tricking systems. Systems always have to be monitored. They have to be reviewed. When you use automation, you can't just trust it at face value. You have to audit it. You have to make sure. And again, this is where Alane comes in and helps immensely to make sure that you don't just go, oh, my accounting process is done. I put it in place. I'm never going to touch it again. And I'll give you an example. One of the companies I used to work for, and this is an automation, not an AI, but it tells you how important it is to know what AI is doing. So we had a process, and the process was for writing checks. And I was in charge of putting in the database that wrote the checks, printing the checks, auto-signing the checks, and then sending the checks out to be delivered. There was no check on what I did. I could have done anything I wanted in this process because I was the IT director. And I remember to this day what the CFO told me when I went in and asked him. He said, "Don't worry, Ken, we trust you." The problem is, yeah, everybody loves that. It's great that you trust me, but I might not always be in that position. And if I'm not trustworthy, but I appear trustworthy, it can lead to a major problem. So when you have your people doing your assessments, when you have AI doing that, you still need to audit, you still need to check, you still need to make sure it is giving you the answers you expect. And I'm going to tell you something. I work with Ken Atchison over at Baldwin Wallace College. He's amazing. He's a professor of cybersecurity. But he said something that I had not thought about. AI and automation, but especially AI, replaces the most rudimentary tasks. But that's also where we have people learn how to do things. So our entry-level jobs are the ones that are going to get replaced. We need to think, how do we create new entry-level jobs that don't require you to be an expert to start? In cybersecurity, we have a major problem where our entry-level jobs require 5 years of experience. Well, you need to find that experience to get those entry-level jobs. That is where things like having a person working with AI can give them that exposure. Let them do some review, bring in that first round person and have them check 20% of what AI gives us and see if it's accurate. So you got to think, how do I have people and AI working together to be predictive and to be adaptive?
And Ken, I think you have some really good examples because cyber attacks can be external, which is, I think, what most of us think of, but they can also be internal, like your example with the checks, where things can happen with when there's not oversight on the process, no matter where it is. And so, if you think about how many spreadsheets a lot of MSPs I talk with, they've got a million spreadsheets for everything. Well, spreadsheets are easily downloadable, shareable, exportable. And so that is a huge piece of where automation can start alleviating some of these jump around spreadsheets where data can be stolen or data can be used somewhere else where there is a data breach. And you touched on this, is where when we're talking about automation, it's not taking away people's jobs necessarily, but data entry, moving data from one platform to another, where things are time consuming, where humans can make notorious mistakes on there. Those are really great tasks that can be automated and not even using AI necessarily. Now, there are some cases for analyzing things where you can use AI in the process, but you don't necessarily need them to automate some of the tasks, like you were saying. And some benefits of where we can use AI and automation. And I use it a little bit interchangeable in here, but they're very different and they can be used together. And there's a cost savings, obviously. We're talking about reducing somebody's workload. But it's also about missed revenue opportunities, because then when you have a team that can focus on the things that you need them to, instead of those tedious tasks that take away from their day, where there's mistakes, where things can really start to bog down your system, then they can actually work on the things that improve your system or your process or your company department, whatever it is. And so you're actually increasing your revenue at the same time as reducing your cost. Accuracy can start to really increase here, because you're having the automation take care of moving the information from one place and another to another. Doing new employee onboarding. This is one that's really notorious for, even in the IT world, where we've got a core set of things that we need to do when we onboard an employee. Things get forgotten. Offboarding an employee, we forgot to turn off their email. They still have access to their email 6 months after we let them go. So that accuracy starts to happen. And then the consistency, everything is done the same way every single time, because it's running through the automation sequence. And so you're spending less time putting out fires too, because your accuracy and your consistency is going up. So we're going to talk about these automation sequences. So I wanted to talk about first, what do we have when we're talking about automation? And we're going to start with a trigger. Something has to happen. And this would be in a software. We can't automate people. We automate tasks within software. So it's really key to have software in place. And a spreadsheet like Google Docs or a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet, that's a software. You're using a software. So that can be your trigger. You're adding information into a spreadsheet. That could be the trigger there. And then from that trigger, actions then happen. And it's not a one-to-one thing. It could be one trigger that launches 10 different actions. And so what that can look like is, this is an automation sequence. Things can run linear, but they don't have to. Multiple things can be happening simultaneously. And that is where you start getting a big cost savings, because you're not waiting on an individual to move this task along. You are having everything delegated simultaneously. So multiple things can be happening at the same time. So this is an easy example. I always like to use sales in these examples, because in order for our companies to succeed, we have to have sales, right? So let's say you're using Salesforce and you just won a new deal in there. By the trigger here would be marking that as a won deal in Salesforce. And then we have all of these actions happen. So you can even see here, it says trigger. The trigger is this, and then all of these actions happen. So it could be where it automatically creates the customer in QuickBooks. Somebody in your accounting department doesn't have to do that. Then it'll create a invoice for that client. It can create, if you're using ConnectWise or something where you need to create tasks for client onboarding, those could be automated. And so it's reducing that 2 hours of work going from a sale to what needs to happen to onboard that client. This is another one. This is just in a different software. So every software that you're using to create these automations looks a little bit different. So I just wanted to show it in a different way. So if you're using Airtable, that's a really popular one. It's a glorified spreadsheet, which is fantastic. I love Airtable, and it is prime for creating automation. And you can see just from one action in Airtable here, how many different things can happen from that trigger. And so we're all using things based on integration. So ConnectWise is awesome. You've got a ton of opportunity there for connecting different platforms, but you can also connect based on APIs. So you're not limited necessarily by just what native integrations are available, which is awesome. And I just want to make sure the Q&A box is, I'm not able to see it right now. Are you seeing it? Okay. I'm not able to see it on my screen, so I wanted to make sure. So how do we get to this point of being able to automate? And this part is what everybody wants to skip and is the number one most important thing. And Ken and I very much agree on this part of it, because you have to know what your current state is. What is your current process? Where are you now? Because if you skip this piece, when you go to automate, you are going to spend countless time and resources into fixing the broken things. You are going to miss where you needed to be compliant and you were trying to just quickly automate, and you are going to make mistakes in the process. And so do this part. It'll save you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars and hours and hours and hours of time, and any compliance mistakes that you wish you wouldn't have made. So you start off with documenting your current state, and from there you're able to identify where can automation be done and if AI makes sense for part of that process. And what this looks like is a workflow diagram.
And I want to take a quick second here, Alane, because I think this is important. You in your company need to understand that you do have processes, you just may not know them. So if you don't have this workflow diagram, if you don't have how you do the things you do, your team is still doing the things they do, you just don't know it. And that's the worst possible outcome, because if you have 3 engineers that have 3 different processes, you're getting thousands of different outcomes. So when you sit here and you talk about this, if you don't have this already, your company does, they just haven't defined it. And that's the worst place. I mean, I wanted to make sure that people realize every company has processes. Most of them don't document it, don't even think about it. And so stuff like what Alane is going to take you through is going to be critical before you go into automation, because I've seen too many people that go and they get ConnectWise and they put in their PSA and then they try to automate to it, but they don't know what it is they're doing. And that's why you have people like Alane to make sure you do this step. It is critical to know and document what the process you have is. Go ahead, I wanted to let it back.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. And just like you said, like you go into ConnectWise, you start doing the automation, and then 2 things happen. You start getting a bunch of errors and you just say, you know what, I'm done. I don't have time for this. Or everybody is working from the wrong information, and everybody is just ignoring the things that are happening that are wrong, which is wasting their time. It's wasting everybody's time. So this part is the part, and it feels like, oh my gosh, I got to do this. Like, this is going to be so overwhelming. And it does take time, but it feels and looks worse than it actually is, because like Ken said, you may not know the process. You don't have to know the process at this part, but your team does. And either we can work with them or they can do this themselves. Excuse me. But this part of it is where the documentation and finding out the process is key. And either you as the business owner or us, and pairing with Ken, can say, these are the parts where automation and where you need to make sure you're compliant, so you're not hit with a fine later on. And from here, we've got the process. We know what can be automated and delegated and if AI can be used. So this is going to be your current map that gets turned into your future map. So it's really important here, and because we're in tech and IT, we tend to feel like things have to be created from scratch and not using a ConnectWise or a third-party platform, which is the wrong way to do it. You do not want to go and custom build, writing your own code, writing your own integrations. That is more work. So I always recommend using an automation platform, using ConnectWise. If you're doing other things outside of it and you want to look at a different platform, there's make.com that is very robust, that I also love, that you can build on top of ConnectWise as well. And so the benefits here would be they are actually designed for creating automation sequences. They're built to make this easy for you so you're not wasting time creating custom code. And if it is a process that can use AI, they're already integrated with OpenAI, which owns like ChatGPT and a bunch of the other platforms that you think of with AI. So they're already there and it's easy to connect. So again, you're not custom coding. So it's a no code or low code. Now there are some complex things where you might need to do some low code things, but you don't need a sophisticated developer for this. So it is much easier to maintain. You can have somebody else on your tech team maintain these programs, and it's less expensive to build an automation sequence because you don't need a full stack developer. You just need somebody that is knowledgeable on tech, that knows how to read API docs. And they're ready to go with literally thousands of integrations. So again, it's plug and play with these platforms. So it makes it so easy. And then with webhooks and APIs, you're able to build other automation sequences. So if you've got, out of the 6,000 native integrations that are in these platforms, if you're using another platform that is not one of those 6,000, then you can use webhooks and APIs to build off of. And so, but that is really key. If you're using a software that does not have an API and does not have an integration through another platform like ConnectWise or Zapier or Make, then it may not be the best secure platform to use because it doesn't have enough things in place to build off of. So that's always a little risky to me. And one of my favorites is there's ready to use templates. So if you're using Salesforce and QuickBooks, that is already a template ready to go that you can go ahead and just say, use this template, and you've got the basis of your integration already, your automation already happening. And then we're just going to round this part out with deciding what to automate, because it can be pretty exciting. Once you decide, hey, I've got so many ideas, I've got so many things chaotic in my processes, my team is overworked and tired and burdened, I'm going to automate everything. And that is not at all what I think you should do. There is a process to this. And so the first thing is it time consuming? Is it taking 2 hours a day for your team to do it? Because that could be a prime place to put in some automation to reduce that tedious work that's taken up their day. Do mistakes frequently occur? Because mistakes mean opportunities for cyber attacks. Mistakes mean fires you have to put out, unhappy clients, time between your internal team trying to figure out. And so that could be a really great spot for it to be automated. And does it reoccur? Does it happen every month, every week? If it's something once a year, it may not be worth your time because it doesn't happen enough to reduce a person's workload enough to make it worthwhile your time to automate it. And then is it done inconsistently? And this is different than accuracy and mistakes, because inconsistency could be you have 4 people that work on this project. You have 4 different engineers. They all do it differently. It is not your company way. It's not your way. It's their way. And so inconsistency then has lots of opportunity for unhappy clients, company burnout, employee burnout. And so that's where I always like to see if there's an opportunity. And automation, will it increase value? I always like to see, okay, could we do something that used to take us 5 days? Can we get it done in 4 hours? Because if that's the case, that just made our services more valuable because we're able to execute faster, we're able to make more money off of it and increase our profit. Data from one place to another is another big one. From one spreadsheet into a dashboard, that's perfect. You can then see capacity, you can see your KPIs all from a dashboard instead of having to go to 4 different spreadsheets. That's data being moved. Or taking a new client from Salesforce into QuickBooks, that's moving data from one place to another. And so that's perfect for automation. And burning people out. Keeping employees long-term is one of the best things we can do as a company, because when they leave, that's institutional knowledge leaving with them. And so if we can reduce burnout for our team and make their day happier, they didn't sign up to be a salesperson for your company because they wanted to put a bunch of information into the CRM and then have a bunch of meetings with the account managers. They did it because they wanted to sell and make a bunch of money. So if we can reduce their burnout and keep them doing the things that they enjoy, or those engineers, the engineers on your team, again, how much of their day is burning them out versus the things that they really like to do. And then the last one, which is a huge one, is what is compliant to automate, because this factors the most important out of everything is to making sure, hey, can I automate this? And is it compliant to automate?
And we're going to go into compliance, but I wanted to take a minute and talk about that burnout journey, because I've been in IT for 35 years. And how many of you sit there and want your team to make sure they document, want your team to make sure they fill out a ticket? And we do it usually by punishing them if they don't do it. That's where things like automation and where even AI can be very helpful. It can help streamline that journey. Technicians want to be doing tech, and so they don't necessarily always document. And we were just working with a group that had a phenomenal technician. He had an unfortunate incident that happened, but he had all of his information in his head. And automation can help make it so that it's easier to fill out your ticket, to remind you that a ticket's outstanding, to remind you what needs to be done, and ask you to fill in the information. So by using automation, you can help people do parts of the job that they don't like. I always use the rule with my team. I call it the 70-30 rule. 70% of the time, you're going to love your job. 30% you're going to hate it. Well, I think every IT consultant will tell you the documentation usually falls under that 30%. You can use the automation as long as you understand what it needs to do. And that gives you power to be able, and that is again why you need the experts to come in. You need Alane to come in and sit down with you, because if you put automation on that is fighting the engineer, is fighting your help desk team, they're going to do everything in their power to get around it. They are going to work extra hard and they're going to leave. So automation that becomes a burden, and trust me, cybersecurity is the extreme of burden. We go in there and we put on, I'll give you an example of this. I was talking to a school district, they had a cyber attack, and their solution was they have a 5-minute clock out on their computers in their classrooms. But I'm talking to these teachers, and I want you all to think about this. You're in front of 27 to 45 students. You're giving a presentation. You're standing in front of the classroom. Your presentation is up on the screen, and it locks in 5 minutes, which means every 5 minutes you walk over and have to hit that keyboard, or you have to stop everything, type in your code, pull out your phone, put in your multi-factor authentication, and then go back and start presenting. So it seemed like a good idea to automate the security, but it will interfere. And that's why it's important to understand what the process is and what the goal is for the automation. How does it help your team be better, not make a bigger burden that they now have to do 15 things because the automation tells them go do 15 things. And that's why you need that process first conversation. What is it I'm doing? What is my goal? And then how do I automate it? Because your engineers are going to love you if you have an automation that makes their job easier, takes care of dealing with that email connection, takes care of documenting. They're going to hate you if now they have to do 10 steps because the automation tells them to do 10 steps, but it doesn't make their job better. It doesn't make it easier. And ironically, that leads into compliance, which is very heavily do it our way or the highway, and can be very restrictive. And I want to talk first about, when you talk about compliance, there are two types of compliance. There is voluntary and involuntary, required by law, by mandate. So CMMC, which is what our company does, is a mandate for the Department of Defense. You have to do it. It's not going to be optional. ITAR is a mandate. HIPAA high trust. We all hear about doctors. And I'll tell you, you want to talk about people that don't want to do security compliance, go talk to a doctor's office. They will tell you in all the flowery language you could ever want how much they hate HIPAA. And I get it. And I'm going to share a story. I had a friend who was dying of cancer, and a person who was taking care of him had a friend that worked at the same company he worked at, and they inadvertently said that he had cancer. That caused a major problem at his workplace, because then, of course, the manager's thinking, how long is he going to be with me? All of these tragic things, that has life effect. It is major. There's a reason we have HIPAA. There's a reason we have CMMC. There's a reason we have GDPR. And so we have to understand those reasons. When I talk with people about CMMC, I explain we don't want, and here's a great example. If you're cleaning a base, you have to have the layout of the base to know where to go. But an enemy wants to be able to attack a base. They want to know what the base layout is. So you have this information that can be vitally important to somebody that wants to hurt us. But you don't think about it. You're like, it's just a maid. They're just cleaning the bathrooms. But you need to know where the bathrooms are, so you now have the blueprints of the base. That's critical information, but we don't equate it necessarily. That's why compliance are there. And then you can get into other compliance, PCI, ISO, SOC. Those become more voluntary. So you do them because you might need them to get jobs, but nobody's going to come in. So I'll tell you right now, CMMC, if you get a contract that required CMMC and you don't have it, or you falsely said you did, you could find yourself liable for 3 times the value of that contract. And it doesn't matter that you didn't know. And I'll tell you, all the ISPs that are on here, all the IT companies that are on here, you're going to become required to have certification or work with a company like ours to make sure that the areas that need to be protected are protected in a certified way, or you're going to become liable. And the government's not going to care that you have it in your contract, you're not liable. It has the Christian doctrine that says if there's a law, you're responsible to follow it no matter what the contract tells you. So I do want to say we don't do like FedRAMP, PCI, but we have great partners like Eric, who I think is on this call from Control Case. We can connect you with people to help you get through these compliance journeys. And again, the automation, we have an expert on this call right now talking with us. It's important to remember where compliance fits into automation. You have to be very careful. In CMMC, the first thing we do is what's called scoping. It's figuring out where the information you need to protect is housed. And that's very important with your automation, because if you have controlled unclassified information, CUI, and you're putting it into your ticketing system, well, your ticketing system just became part of the scope. How do we pull that out so we don't have to make the ticketing system? And so when you're going through that, the first thing you need to figure out is what needs to be protected, where is it? Sounds very much like automation. What is it we're trying to do? How do we get there? What is it we're protecting? How do we get there? In CMMC, MSPs, you are now very much involved and part of the journey. So if any of your clients are doing DoD contracts, you now could be liable for what they do. We can move on to the next slide. So remember, it is going to be a punishment conversation. I love this slide because the government's coming down. I'm part of the Cyber Reserve, and I was going through Cyber Reserve training here in Ohio. And we were told specifically, the governor is expecting every state institution, that can be a K-12 school, that can be higher education, that can be any government agency, that can be the utilities, are going to have to meet NIST standards, because they don't want to have a situation where people are getting attacked. We have lots of important information inside of these agencies. So the government's going to get harder and harder. Europe is very strict on personal information. GDPR says that a person can come to your company and say, I want all the information related to me taken out. And if you can't do it, you're in violation. And that's a major thing to be able to do, because think about how much information is spread across your organization. And if you don't have automated systems in place, you're not going to be able to do that. So if you're working in Europe, you better make sure you have your automation ready. And a lot of the states in America are going that way. New York and California have very strict personal rights to data privacy laws. You have to make sure, because you don't want to be in court fighting why you couldn't do what was required by law. You're probably not going to win. They've got more money and they're willing to take the time to take you down. So remember that when you're talking about compliance, make sure that you take it seriously. You can go on. So this is the role. I get talk to, and I talk with lots of MSPs, and I get the same question. Well, my sub of my sub, who is a sub of Boeing, doesn't have a CMMC requirement. Why would I have one? And I'm like, just because they don't know they have a CMMC requirement, every company is going to have a CMMC requirement that works with the federal government for the Department of Defense starting next year. Doesn't matter if they don't know they have it, they have it. And if they aren't taking it seriously and you're taking care of them, you are now exposed with them. And I don't think you want to go down with the ship. So this is rule 32 of CRF 170 section 17019, because it's the government, it's got to have 5 million letters and numbers before it says it. If an organization seeking assessment, they don't even have to have it yet. If they're just seeking it, uses an external service provider, MSPs are external service providers, they have to be at the same level. So that is why we are talking with MSPs, because we can use the scope to remove that part of the company from what you cover. You don't have to give up your entire company. I'll tell you an example. We're working with a great MSP right now. They have a DoD subcontractor. They have 250 endpoints. But after we did our scope analysis, only 17 of them have to be under CMMC level 2 requirement. So they don't have to lose all the rest of that company. All they have to do is let us segment out those 17, put them into a controlled, isolated environment, and then they can keep the rest of their customers, and they don't have to get CMMC certified because they're not touching that data. But if you touch that data and you don't do this, government wants to come after you, and they keep saying it. They've been putting this out for a year. They've been telling people for a year, and MSPs don't necessarily hear it. If you don't think your customers are doing DoD contracts, it will be too late if you find out the government, the one's knocking on your door. So I'm going to give you a real quick hint. I would ask any of your customers, any of their primes, to see, do they have to do a SPARS, SPRS? Do they have NIST 800-171 requirements? Do they have CMMC requirements? Do they make any products for the Department of Defense or services? If they answer yes to any of these statements, they have to get CMMC certified. So it's important to remember that. And I want to take a moment, and this goes back to what Alane said about using and adopting automation. Compliance can be a checkbox journey, and you have to be very careful because you want to actually have a culture of safety. You want to have a culture of compliance, and you want to have your team on board with it. And I put on here Dr. Hanley. She was supposed to be on this meeting, and I'd love to have introduced her because she is an amazing woman. But she did a study that talked about compliance versus impact. One of the things all of us are supposed to do is awareness training. So once a year, we set everybody down, we bore the living crap out of them and say, be safe, be safe, be safe, be safe. Then they walk out of the room and they never do anything with it again until the next year when they get a checkbox because they attended a training, be safe, be safe, be safe. That's not going to create impact. When you do automation, you want to create impact. You don't want to automate a system, like she was saying, that you do once a year or it doesn't increase your profits or reduce your costs. It's a waste of time. Automation can be expensive, but it can save you immensely when it's done right. And the same thing is with any type of compliance. When you get there, and compliance is not a one and done journey, it is a continuing process. And that's what I was talking when I said when you did automation, you need to make sure that you are always evaluating the automation. It worked great last year, but this year it no longer might be good. You might have to change it. You might have to replace it. You might have to evaluate it. You cannot let anything sit. You can't let it get stale. You can't let it keep running the way it's run for the last 5 years if you aren't reassessing. And compliance, and again, Eric, we love you. You are wonderful. I want to give you another shout out. He talks about that. And if you do CMMC every 3 years, you have to be reassessed. But if you break down between those 3 years and government says you broke down, you become liable again. So you have to keep the processes up. You have to keep the practices up and done over and over. And I know it can feel overwhelming. And one of the things I talk about, and it's very important to remember this, again, in automation, in AI, and in compliance, is mission safe. If you can't do your job, automation was a big mistake. If your team is sitting there and they're trying to figure out how to put in a ticket and they spend an hour every day trying to figure out how to put in a ticket, the ticket system didn't make their life better. And you need to have them be able to tell you that this is not working, this is not good. And that's why an outside third party can be very helpful, because employees tend to be afraid to tell their managers, this is not the thing I wanted to do, this is not going well. And we tend to say, well, don't bring me bad news. And we shoot the messenger. But your team is the best informer of what can be happening, and making sure that you're bringing them in, because they might have a part of the process they're doing better than what you have. You want to have that ability to change your automation as you go. Make sure that you're compliant. So that's why that third-party piece of this journey is so important. And that's why you have to keep looking at what is it we're doing, what is the compliances we have to meet, and how are we using automation to get there. And I do want to take a minute here. I kind of mentioned it before, but I'll mention it very much now. When you use AI, be very careful. If you're doing cybersecurity and you have legal requirements from compliance, AI could be a major problem. AI uses what you put in to build its next answer. If you put in CUI into an AI, like ChatGPT and OpenAI, it takes what you put in and says, okay, for my next answer, I'm going to parse this out and then give it back out. Well, that could be CUI that's being given back out, and the government's going to blame you. They're not going to blame OpenAI. They're going to blame you because you shouldn't put it in.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was talking with Microsoft Copilot, I was asking them, is there a way to make Copilot CMMC compliant? The answer they said was, do not use it, period. There was no gray area. Usually everything is gray. It was, don't do it. It is not going to be compliant. They are using the information you put in to build the next thing. And it makes sense, because you need to build the next part of AI so that it can be smarter and better. But you want to make sure the information that you put in is not information you want to be going out to the world. So when you're looking at compliance, make sure that you're very careful what AI you're allowing in, what information it can get to. If you don't understand the algorithms that are being used to train the AI, don't use the AI in compliant environments. It will bite you in the butt.
Yeah, and really also why you still need to have humans involved, because it is only as good as the prompt. And even if we're using AI in an automation sequence, we have told it what the prompt is. So it's giving an output based on information that a human gave it. And that information might need to change over time. And so watching these automation sequences. Now, this isn't to say that automation is a huge burden, because your team could audit these every 6 months, every year, and you have a much smaller team than what it took to execute the manual work that was being done. So there's a huge difference here from auditing and making sure things are flowing correctly versus manually continuing to do every aspect of every job. And so there's a big piece here, and I appreciate, Ken, what you were saying on the topic.
Mm-hmm. So as we go, and this is talking about AI and how AI learns, and this is talking about that compliance journey. AI can be a powerful tool in getting you to certain compliances. And again, compliance is not just cybersecurity and security compliance. There is process compliance, there is operational compliance, and those are the things. So when you talk about automation, you can use a quality compliance. I think it's ISO 9000, and I apologize, I always get confused on the ISOs. But that has nothing to do with security. That has to do with making sure you make a consistent product, a consistent process. And so it's important to remember processes can be automated. So a bad process, and I'll share this. I used to do Taekwondo. And how many of us have heard practice makes perfect? We all say it over and over, practice makes perfect. He was my master, and he said, that is not true. Practice makes permanent. So if you do it wrong 10,000 times, you will always do it wrong. So if your automation puts the widget in the wrong place, it will always put it in the wrong place. So now you'll make 10,000 broken parts. So practice does not make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. So when you're building this, when you're working with your third-party consultant, you want to remember that you want to understand it. And when you're using AI, you don't want to trust it without having that person review. You don't want to trust it just because it's AI. You want to go in there and help it learn what you need so that it can do it faster. But then you always want to spot check it. My degree was in statistics and decision science. You want to make sure, you want to pick one every 5 articles or one every 5, and just check to see, is it the quality you think it is? Because processes can break, processes can change, automation can break. How many of us were stuck at an airport a couple months ago thanks to CrowdStrike? That was automation gone crazy. They used AI to evaluate if things were ready to publish, and then they published it. And I don't know about you, I happened to be at Exchange Security at that time, and I was stuck in Dallas. And they had no idea when I was going to get home. I ended up driving home because I wasn't going to get home. I lost 3 days of work, and that's expensive for me to lose 3 days of work because a process failed. We can't take people out of this journey. We can't trust AI to be everything, and automation needs management. And that's where that's when you need that third party. Don't try to do this alone. Maybe 5% of us will be successful doing it alone. And I tell people this with CMMC. You can try doing it alone and you might be successful, but the odds stand against you. So don't do it. It's not worth it. That's not what you do. It's what we do every day.
All right,
What's
Ken,
next?
we're getting to the wrap up. All right, so a couple of things to wrap this up, and then if y'all have questions, put it in the Q&A. I don't know, Ken, if you can see it. I'm not able to
watching the
right
chat.
now. Okay, perfect. So, Ken has been talking a lot about compliance, CMMC. He has some ways for you that even just to get started by starting to ask your current customers, if they work with any DoD contracts, and Ken partners with other MSPs on this. And Ken, you can talk more in depthly about it.
Yes. So if you are an MSP and you are not going to go through the certification process, if you want to go through the certification process, we are here and glad to help get you through it. And we have third-party assessor companies. Eric is, again, one of our best, that can go and pre-schedule. We have a 7-phase program we take you through to get certified. But if you don't want to get certified, and a lot of MSPs don't because it is expensive and it is time-consuming, we actually can get in there and pay you. So we will pay you for what part of the customer you give to us. We won't touch the rest of the customer. And that way you don't lose your customer. And as an MSP, you do not want to have a situation where you're like, well, I guess I'll just give it to you. Okay, you'll pay me some money, but I lost my entire customer. And so that's an important part of the model we bring. I don't want to do general printer fixes. I don't want to do general network support. I want to do CMMC support. That's usually only somewhere between 10 to 20% of a company. So therefore, 75 to 80% of the company is still going to need support and management, and it's outside of what we take care of. So we work with you, we give you that great opportunity, and you make money off of what we're doing. We've already paid out hundreds of dollars. We've just started this program this year, and we're looking for more partners to come on. So if you're interested, go check out our website, ontechnologypartners.com, and learn more about our program.
Yeah, and so Ken's all about, you making money off of it. And then if you want to start automating processes, I'm here to help you start saving money, reducing team size, reducing labor costs, things like that. And we can start looking at what processes can be automated, which ones don't fall under something that needs to be compliant, is not CMMC related. And we can start automating those processes and alleviating a lot of that burden on your team. And for those of you that want to talk more with us, I've got this slide here. So this is our contact information. Ken and I both are really active on LinkedIn. So you can scan us and connect with us directly. You can shoot us a message even on there. Ken and I are on there on a daily basis, interacting and posting different helpful things.
Anybody have any questions?
I
I feel
know.
like we've done a lot of talking.
I know. So I'm shocked.
Yeah, we did amazing. We answered every
That's-
question that anybody has on AI, automation, and compliance. And we will be putting this up and making it available on either by link, or I'm going to be probably putting this up onto our website so people can see it. We'd love for you to share this video. We think it's really important, especially as we start to move into 2025. CMMC is going to be enforced in 2025. And like I said, I've been talking, I was at ConnectWise, I presented at ConnectWise, I was at PAX 8, I was at Exchange. MSPs are not realizing what's coming. And if your MSP is not automated itself, and I'll tell you right now, I was just talking to an M&A company, a mergers and acquisition company that specifically does MSPs. Your MSP value explodes if you can show those automated processes. So if you're looking at transitioning out, at selling, you want to make sure that you've automated, that you've defined your processes and you've automated as much as possible, because that makes it easier for them to transition your company into whatever they're doing with it. So not only is this valuable for you today and your bottom line, it increases your company value tomorrow during your sale or exit position.
So we got a couple of questions. So Stephanie, for your question, is the product only for cybersecurity? If you're asking me that question, that the answer is no, it's not just for cybersecurity. It's for any process, from employee onboarding to client management to any process that you are managing. That can be looked at. So some of it might fall under cybersecurity, which that's when we would talk with Ken if it's something related to that. But there are so many processes within your organization that could be looked at automating that is unrelated to cybersecurity, but as a result helps you be more secure.
And Tracy, the answer to your question, we do take 100% CMMC clients. We do have alliance partners that are not MSPs, and then we will work with the company. Again, the scoping depends on how it goes, but you'll get paid for that 100% of the client. If they are all need to be CMMC, we will pay you for that, and that works good. And if you are not, so if you're not necessarily an MSP, you can still become an alliance partner and get paid, and then we can work with the company to see, do they need another MSP? We have a lot of MSP partners that we can have work with us to get them where they need to be, and then we can work to make sure that you get a commission from that. So an alliance partner doesn't have to be an MSP. We find most alliance partners today are MSPs, but it's a great way to add additional revenue to what you do each day. Did that answer your question? Any other questions? We did absolutely amazing.
Yes, we did. Okay, Tracy said yes. Perfect.
And Tracy,
right.
I'll reach out to you after if you're okay with that, and we can connect and talk.
Yes, Mario, we are going to send out a link to the recording to everybody. I'll shoot an email out with it so that you can share it with your team, listen to our amazing words again, whichever you prefer. But and if you didn't get a chance to ask a question and there's something on your mind, reach out to either Ken or I, and we'd be super happy to talk more with you. Thank you all so much for coming, and we look forward to chatting with you offline.
Thank you so much.